Greetings scholars, and welcome to episode 4 of Classical Chinese for Beginners. It's the first episode in the Year of the Snake, so let's all slither studiously to surpass suboptimal sagacity, surely. Nobody's told me I've messed up on episode 3 yet, so let's dive straight into last episode's homework. Once again, everyone's done a great job oversetting. Some prefer to do it word by word, and others go for a more naturalized English. Both of these ways are good. What is of foremost weight to me as a teacher is that you show that you've understood the text. That said, I would be a bad teacher, doing the sin of sloth, 失之惰, if I were to fully skip over the picking of nits, so let's have a look-see. The character ye is one of the most oft-seen grammatical particles in classical Chinese. It also has a broad range of uses, many of which are not at odds with each other, and as such may be found embodied by one character. First and foremost, ye can act as a pause marker, that is, somewhat like an outspoken comma. It can also mark an ongoing state, that is, that something is unchanging or happening without an end in sight. Also, it can mark declarative sentences, something is something else. On top of that, ye can also have an air of telling or unriddling, making something clear to the listener, or it might make a statement softer, like the modern Mandarin particle ne, Japanese ne, or British English in it. As you can see, the mightly readings are many, and at times can be tricky to render into English. From what I've seen, everyone who handed in their homework seems to have grasped the gist of it, though everyone also put weight on some meanings over others. In truth, you could most likely write an entire scholarly essay on the topic, but I'm not mad enough to make an hour-long video essay quite yet. So instead, here's my much shortened down take. The first ye is a pause marker, and the other ye marks the end of the sentence or statement. Finally, both instances of ye also mark the ongoing state, which can often be seen as giving timeless truths. So mayhap what Master Kung was trying to say was that human nature never changes, but people's habits is what sets them apart, ain't it? And now, after I've either pissed you off or made you piss yourself laughing, let's tackle the main homework. Overall, I'd say great work, scholars. I did, however, see many of you oversetting the last 6 lines as if the children don't study, what are the old to do, or some offshoot thereof. That is, you treat yo, the young, and lao, the old, as 2 different entities. So let's see why this might not be quite right. Since the 6 characters before, 子不学非所宜, puts forward 子, child, children as the topic, we should see the following lines as running with the same theme. Furthermore, in 又不学老何为, we should read the passage as setting 2 stages of human life against each other, youth and old age, while asking the rhetorical question, if one does not study in youth, then what can you do in old age? And yes, the if-then construction is not present in the original, but it is quite strongly hinted at. And that's it for reviewing the homework. 做得好，大家辛苦. If you have further questions, feel free to ask in the comments, but I'd say we better get this show on the road, don't you think? 玉不琢不成器，人不学不知义，为人子方少时，亲师友，习礼仪。玉不琢不成器，人不学不知义，为人子方少时，亲师友，习礼仪。玉 jade, jadestone. A drawing of a handful of jade rings on a string. The right tail of pieces changes between characters, but due to inflation were eventually reduced to but 3. No more, no less. 3 is the number of thy jade rings, and the number of thy jade rings shall be 3. 5 is right out. Nerd note! The speck in the bottom right corner was tacked on later to make y more sundered from Wang, king. On that note, when y is used as a radical, it keeps its earlier shape, wherefore the jadestone radical is often wrongfully nicknamed Wang Zipang, or the king radical.
Emotional damage.
Zhuo. To carve or to polish, especially jade. From yu, jade, and chu, a gilded boar or barrow, giving the reading. In the olden days, gilding was done with a knife, so many characters with chu as a phonetic have to do with cutting or chopping, including zhuo. Furthermore, zhuo often stands for jade carving as a whole, or as a kenning for the polishing of one's skills, strength of will, and so on. Cheng, to become. From wu, a halberd, and ding, here standing for a walled town or borough, which gives us the reading. Formerly, in the Chinese way of thinking, any settlement without a wall, no matter how large, was but a village. In other words, you needed a wall and the weapons to ward said wall with to truly become a borough. Cheng, to become, is thus also the root form of cheng, wall, town wall, fortress, which later on had the earth radical tu tacked onto it to mark it as sundry from cheng, to become. Qi, tool, where, that. From 4 ko, mouths, with quan, dog, hound between them. The old telling is that vats for storing food often had a doggo warding them against rats and thieves. Another more recent telling put forward by Zhu Fangpu is that the word qi once meant to bark. One dog making the noise of 4 equals very very loud. And that character was later borrowed for the same sounding word meaning vat, ware, tool. We can liken this with the character fei, which also means to bark, and characters like yin, xiao, and jiao, which all have to do with making noise or yapping. While the jury is still out on which telling is the right one, I find myself leaning towards the latter. Zhi, to know. From shi, arrow, giving the reading, and kou, mouth. When one knows what one is talking about, one's words are as swift and straight as an arrow. Nerd note! Sharp-eyed scholars will be wondering what's up with the bronze seal character. The long and short of it is that zhi, to know, and zhi, wisdom, were once written the same, so the bronze seal is the character zhi, wisdom, borrowed to write zhi, to know. Since zhi, wisdom, appears in the TCC, you'll have to wait for a later episode to get the full telling of that character. Hashtag sequel baiting. Shao, few, not many. A drawing of 4 grains of rice or sand, which, all things considered, isn't a whole lot. This character is likely related to xiao, small, and sha, sand, but I drew grains of rice instead of sand because I felt like it. Artistic license, baby! Shao is another one of those pesky characters with more than one reading, and the reading we see in the TCC happens to be the other one, shao, meaning young, that is, being few years of age.
Most have seen too many winters, or too few.
And speaking of year tides,
Shi, time, yeartide, 2 hours. At the earliest, from ri, sun, day, and zhi, to go, which gives the reading. The sun yon-faring through the sky is how we know that time is fleeting. Cun, inch, was tacked on later. Zhi and cun gives si, the root form of chi, to hold or to grasp. Time, as they say, flies, so we must grasp the day tightly or risk missing out. Or as the Romans would say, carpe diem. Nerd note! Hey, did you know that at first carpe diem did not mean to enjoy the present, but rather get up bright and early to get shit done? Anyways, the root meaning of shi is yeartide, that is spring, summer, fall, and winter. As the shifting year tides were used to mark the flow of time, 时 came to mean time as a whole, and as Chinese timekeeping became better and better, it also came to mean more narrowly the old Chinese hour, which was 120 minutes long or twice as long as an hour is today, meaning that on a Chinese watch there were 12 时 in one day, each paired with one of the zodiac deer, so for bispell noon was the hour of the horse. 亲 mother and father, close kin, also to become close to or to become fond of. At the earliest, from 心 suffering, giving the reading, and 见 to see, to meet. I've heard enough horror stories from Chinese seeing their parents over Spring Festival that I think I get right what this character is getting at. Jokes aside, later the wood radical 木 was tacked on, giving us 真 hazel as the sound element, and I 100% believe this was to not have the character for mum and dad read as meet suffering. 亲 also means to become close to or fond of, which is how it is used in the text. The logic here is that you become so close to someone as to think of them as your own kin. 友 friend. From two 友 right hands together, which also gives the reading. Two hands meeting in friendship or two hands pushing the same way. Two friends working together towards the same goal.
You son of a bitch.
Friendship!
Which was how the old Chinese saw friendship. Not only that you met up every other weekend to get drunk and play vidya at each other's house, and I realize I may just have made a bunch of people reevaluate their friendships. My bad. Li, rite, ritual. The oldest form shows a ceremonial decorated drum and 2 strings of jade. Chinese Bronze Age rituals often enfolded offering jade to gods and forebears, as well as a sick drumbeat, yo. The altar radical 是 was tacked on later, maybe to set Li asunder from feng, bountiful greatness, which looks much alike in the clerical and standard scripts. Yi, hue, outward likeness, ceremony, rite. From Ren, man, and Yi, righteousness. Righteous is as righteous does, and in a Chinese frame, a righteous man must both look and act the part, by being couth, dignified, well-groomed, and all-round well-kept. Thus, Yi means both hue or outward likeness and rite or ceremony. Nerd note! Li and Yi are sundry but linked ideas. To make a gross simplification, Li is the inner half of the Confucian ritual, that is, having the right amount of respect for oneself and others. Yi, on the other hand, is the outward half, that is, your looks, your manners, and so on. In modern Chinese, these two ideas have become one word, Li, meaning etiquette or decorum. And now, on to the grammar section. Today's text does not offer much in the way of new grammar, so I will be fleshing out this episode's grammar section with some oft-seen grammatical particles we've seen earlier, but put in new set layouts, starting with... Let's do a quick once-over. As a verb, yi means to take or wield, and as a co-verb works much like an English preposition, with, by, and so on. Wei is the verb to do, to make, to become, as well as the linking verb to be, to act as. These two often show up together, although not in the TCC, along the pattern you see here on screen. Word for word, we would read this as to take A to be B, or to wield A as B, but more often it is used to say to think of A as B, to wit, 以喻为贵. Word for word, take jade as deer, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, so instead we would read this as to think of jade as being deer, or to think highly of jade. Another bispell from the Guanzi. Why yes, we are getting ever closer to working with real classical texts. 以人为本. Word for word, take man as root. Again, this reading makes very little sense. The larger context here is that a great ruler will make the people he governs the groundwork of his rule, thus to think of the common man as the groundwork of his country. And another one, just for good measure, from 列女传, 以父母为天. Tian means sky or heaven, so word for word, take father, mother as heaven. Or less clunkily, to think of one's parents as heaven itself, that is, as the highest form of headship. The object of E can sometimes be fronted to underscore it, or left out altogether if readily understood, in which case we see E and Wei right next to each other. To give you an idea of how common this layout is, I did a quick search on CText and came up with over 8,000 hits from pre-Qin and Han era sources.
It's over 8,000! 8,000!
Here's another byspell straight from a classical text, the Li Ji, the classical rites, where we see Yi Wei right next to each other. Li Yi Wei Qi. Word for word, rituals, righteousness, take as tool. The context here is that the ancient sages would set up rules for mankind to live by, and would wield rituals and righteousness as their tools to do so. Note how Li, rituals and righteousness, has been fronted to underscore their weight in the word set. And here's another bison from the same text. 生无以为阳, 死无以为理也. If you've been paying heed since episode 1, you should know all but one character here. Sheng means life, to live, to be born, as seen in the character Xing, inborn nature from episode 1. Yang, which we saw in the last episode, here means to nourish or to care for, rather than to rear or to raise. The one character that is fully new is Si, meaning death. Thus, word for word, life, haven't, take as nourish, death, haven't, take as ceremony, ye. In this quote, the object, which would have showed up between Wu and Yi, is left out, so we'll need to guess from the text what the object might have been. The context here is that the philosopher Zilu, one of Confucius' disciples, was lamenting how the poor have naught to nourish their parents with while they, that is the parents, are still alive, and not to do the burial rites with after their passing. Confucius' answer is that if a son can provide a bowl of hot porridge to his living parents and wrap their bodies for burial even without a coffin after their death, he should be seen as having fulfilled his filial plight if this is all that his funds allow. From this larger context, the unseen object that ought to show up between Wu and Yi can thus be read as means, funds, resources, and the like. Nerd note! Quick note ere we press on. Some of you who learn modern Mandarin may know that Yi Wei means to mistakenly believe. However, in classical Chinese, Yi Wei means only to think of something as something else, not in a wrongful or mistaken way. Alright, on to the next one. When we last saw the character Fang, it had the meaning of way of doing something or method. In today's text, however, Fang is an adverb, meaning right at that time, underscoring that something is happening right now, often as a lead up to something else, like right when X was happening, something else happened as well. Let's see this in a byspell, shall we? 孟子方食. Word for word, Master Meng, right when, to eat. Mengzi was eating, or right when Mengzi was eating. And here's another byspell. 窦禹君方过岩山，有人禁止. Word for word, 窦禹君, right when, go over, 岩山, have, man, close, him. 窦禹君, you remember, is Mr. Krakow's Swallow Mountain from episode 2. Here, 禁 must be a verb and not a stative verb, since it has an object after it. And 之, when it appears at the end of a sentence, can safely be read as the third-person object pronoun, him, her, it. In other words, Dou Yujun was making his way over the Swallow Peaks when someone came up to him. Fang has a few other uses, but we'll go over those in coming episodes.
Well, when I was was a young man and never been kissed, I got to thinking it over. How much I...
So we already know how to say that something happened in the past by blocking xi, but what if we want to say when something happened? Well, then we just tack 之时 on there to make a when clause. The full pattern is, as you can see on the screen here, and used in a saying, 老子习道之时, word for word, old master practicing the way, the time. Nerd note! Lao Tzu, or the Old Master, is a central figure in Taoism and often thought of as its founder. This saying can thus be read as when Lao Tzu was practicing the Tao. Pretty straightforward, right? Let's take a gander at another saying. 孟子少时无父. Word for word, Meng, master, young, time, haven't, father. Note that I knowingly left out 之, but in a line like this, it hardly makes the saying less straightforward. I think you can readily read this line without the need for an oversetting, so let's make haste to the next and last grammar item on today's to-do list. We went over saw in the last episode. At that time, I mentioned it is often seen together with the usual suspects, yi, wei, and zhi, but that we'd have a look at those layouts in a future episode. Well, turns out the future is now, old man, so let's have a look at how to wield saw with zhi. Let's first quickly go over them each on their own before we see how they work together. Saw is a noun, meaning place, but in classical Chinese is also used to make a noun phrase or a relative clause, which we in English do with a relative pronoun, that, which, whom, and so on. Wherefore I translated saw as that which. Zhi is a verb meaning to go, an object pronoun him, her, it, and most notably a grammatical particle marking ownership or fellowship, that something belongs to something else, and a grammatical particle that makes noun phrases. Now let's start off with an easy bispell and work from there. Suo gui, word for word, place, dear, which we can read as that which is thought of as dear. When a noun phrase like this is preceded by a subject, often a zhi is used to link the subject to the noun phrase, like so. Used in a saying, 人之所贵, word for word, men, possessive, place, dear. What men think of as dear, that which men hold dear. Mind that I didn't use zhi with any of the bispells in last episode. Again, that is since zhi can be left out if the line can still be understood without it. That said, when it does show up, it makes the subject-noun phrase fellowship much clearer, as well as underscoring that we are indeed dealing with a noun phrase. When we use a relative clause to modify a noun, in classical Chinese, the head noun comes after the relative clause, with the ground layout shown on screen. Used in a saying, we get 孟母所断之机杼. Word for word, Meng, mother, place, break, possessive, loom, shuttle. The loom and shuttle that Mother Meng broke. And what if you wanted to add a verb after the head noun? Then we'd get 孟母所断之机杼不贵. Word for word, Meng, mother, place, break, possessive, loom, shuttle, not dear. The loom and shuttle that Mother Meng broke was cheap. So now we have a full layout for relative clauses in classical Chinese, as you can see here, and hopefully you also know how to wield it. But don't worry, if you didn't get it, you can either rewatch the episode, ask me in the comments, or try your hand at the exercise sheets on my Patreon. But I think that'll do it for this grammar section, and now let's do some commentary. It is hard to overstate how much weight jade has in Chinese culture. Carved jadestone has been found in Chinese tombs from as far back as the Stone Age, in the form of jade axe heads, jade rings, and the so-called pig dragons, among others. The stone was held highly for its clean, white fairness and for the skill needed to work it, making it dearer than gold, silver, or other gemstones. For its fairness, jade was often used as an honorific, and also when talking about white and comely or sightly things. So snow-covered peaks were called Yushan, jade fell. A woman's pale and slender hands were known as Yushou, jade hands.
Beautiful hand!
so on. Law-wise, this honorific can be used of both men and women, but I'd say it's more often used when talking to or about women than men.
All the boys say wow, wow, girls in the back sing wow, wow.
Beyond being a kenning for fairness, its dearness meant that jadestone became a mark of high standing, the white nephrite more so than green jadeite, although jadeite also became highly sought after in later dynasties. The stone was thought to bestow health and long life, wherefore it was used in medicine or as shielding amulets. Furthermore, jade chopsticks were said to ward against poison.
Oh, right, the poison for Cusco, the poison chosen specially to kill Cusco's poison.
And jade mouthpieces in opium pipes were said to take away the drug's harmful effects.
'Twas also believed that jade could stop the dead from rotting or grant life everlasting, making jade tokens of rebirth, like this jade cicada right here, into beloved and oft-seen forms of grave goods for those who could afford it. This belief also sparked a trend among the royal family of the Han dynasty to bury their dead in full-body jade suits of armor.
To the polished scholarly class, on the other hand, a carved piece of clean white jade stood for uprightness and strength of will. The hard work needed to turn a raw piece of uncut jade into a work of craftsmanship became a kenning for the hard work needed to become a true gentleman.
Allow me to put forth Exhibit A, Your Honor. The sheer amount of times this line shows up in Confucian writings.
如切如磋，如琢如磨, or as we cut and file, as we carve and grind. This ties in with the TCC telling us that a piece of jade must be carved to become a thing of use, right how a human being must go through years of learning and working on oneself to become a righteous and upstanding member of society. Part of this self-work was finding teachers worthy of following and friends worth spending time with, so the TCC tells its readers to get close to teachers and friends because they will help us become better people.
Like a skilled jade carver making a high piece of craftsmanship from a single chunk of raw jade. And that's a wrap. 1,000 pardons for the delay, scholars. I'd planned on uploading this video last week, but unfortunately I was struck by Apollo's bow of pestilence instead of Cupid's heart-tipped arrows. 'Tis the curse of Saint Valentine's on God. Anywho, this episode ended up being a bit shorter than its predecessors. Something overpromising and underperforming. But if you can find it in your hearts to forgive me, I will make it up to you in episode 5, which is already in the works.
As always, here's today's text, copy it, learn it, understand it, write your oversettings in the comments, and I'll go over them in the next episode. No extra homework today, but as I've said before, there will be character writing and exercise sheets on my Patreon page for those of you who like having something to work with between episodes. We're getting closer and closer to the point where we can start reading real classical texts, so you can look forward to a growing tale of real quotes in the coming episodes. And remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons, join the Chinese Merchant Guild by supporting me on Patreon, and stay tuned for more classical Chinese content. You're all truly wonderful.
Until next time, scholars!